Christmas has always been one of my most favorite holidays. Not for the reasons you might think, though. Sure, the occasional gifts under the tree was always a pleasant part of it, but the thing I admired most about Christmas was the scenery. The beautiful lights strung up around the Christmas tree, as well all over people's houses. But the best part of it all was the beautiful snow that always decorated the ground during December. I'll tell you now, there is no sight more beautiful than waking up on a cold December morning and looking out the window to see the snowflakes gracefully falling from the sky and covering the neighborhoods. But anyways, enough of my rambling on about how much I love the holiday season. I should get to my story I wanted to share. While I love snow in the cold December month, I'm terrified of blizzards. And, well, not for the reasons you were gonna assume. That's why I'm here to tell you about today. So, grab some hot chocolate, if you'd like, and know that this story isn't going to be nothing like what you've ever heard. But considering about some of the other stories I've seen on here, I think I won't sound too crazy. I hope. Anyways, it was Christmas Eve, 2 years ago. I'd just been doing some last-minute shopping at some local stores when I got the word that there was a snowstorm that was determined to fall upon the town later that night. So I finished my errands and headed back to my car and began the drive home. On my way home, the winds began to pick up, and the snowfall was getting harder. Luckily for me, I was nearly back. Once I made it home, the winds were super high, and the snow was covering every inch of my yard. I struggled to reach into my pockets and pulled out my keys, trying to find the key to unlock my front door. After about a minute of struggling, I managed to find the right key and slipped into the lock. Thank God it did, as I felt I was going to get frostbite. I came inside my house, shivering as I shut the door tight behind me. I walked in the living room and set my last-minute gifts on the living room table and rushed to my heater. It would take a good 5 minutes for it to activate and start warming up. Probably should have bought a better system, but I wasn't exactly liquid this month. After sitting by the heater for a good few minutes, I went back over and grabbed my shopping bags off the table. I had bought an SD card for my little cousin, a moon lamp for my niece, and a Freddy Fazbear's pizza kit for my nephew. None of these items were cheap, might I add, but I spare no expense when it comes to family. For the next hour, I wrapped up the gifts and placed them under my tree until tomorrow. I then laid down on my couch and wrapped myself in a warm blanket while watching the Christmas special that were airing on TV. This was nice, all warm and cozy, with the sound of the blizzard outside. It was moments like these that I would really appreciate how beautiful winter season was. You know? I don't remember when exactly, but I eventually did fall asleep, with nothing but the sound of the blizzard that drowned out everything else. I woke up many hours later, the sound of the blizzard still howling outside. I sat up. My entire house was dark. As I exhaled shakily, I realized I could see my breath. It was very cold in my house and my TV was off. I sat up and went over to my thermometer on the wall. It was 37 degrees in the house. How did it get so cold? I then froze in place. I thought I could hear something. It sounded like thumping, coming from somewhere outside my house. I blew the sounds off as just snowfall hitting my house. The power seemed to be out as I couldn't turn on any of my lights, and my TV, or anything for that matter. I decided to go outside and check the breaker box. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. There was a literal blizzard outside, but it seemed to die down from when it first started, and it wasn't much warmer in here than it was outside. I needed to have my heater on or I would freeze overnight. So I went to my kitchen and retrieved a flashlight. I then went upstairs to my closet and grabbed my snow gear, then ventured outside into my backyard. The snowfall was even more intense than I had anticipated, and my snow jacket was barely keeping me warm. I just needed to check on the power, and I could go back inside. I made my way to the side of my house and found the panel after a few minutes of brushing off the snow. I opened it and began flipping switches, trying to see which one would help restore the power. After a few minutes, I gave up. If I stayed out here any longer, I would get frostbite. I closed the panel, turned back, and began to head inside. Although, when I made it around to my backyard, I noticed something I hadn't beforehand. There were very noticeable footsteps in the snowy ground. leading from outside my backyard window to beyond my backyard. I could feel my nerves begin to rise at impossible speeds. I kneeled down on one knee to examine the footprints better. They didn't look human or resembled any sort of boot. They resembled an animal's footprints, but I couldn't tell what kind. But I didn't really want to know, as the footprint was rather large, definitely not from something small. I stood upright, took one last careful glance around my yard, not that I could see anything considering the weather and darkness of the night, and turned around and re-entered my house through my back door, making sure to lock it tight behind me. Once I was back inside, I realized that it felt even colder than before. I needed to warm up my house, so I decided to light my fireplace for once. I placed some extra dry wood I had kept from my past camping trip and placed it inside the fireplace. I then went to my kitchen and retrieved a lighter. Within minutes, my fire was burning hot. The warmth felt so nice, so I kneeled down in front of it for a few minutes. I then suddenly heard something. Something that was very clearly audible despite the ongoing blizzard. Thumping. From above me. It was loud, very heavy. It almost resembled footsteps. Someone was on my roof. But how? There was a snowstorm going on. Someone could easily fall and slip. I waited a few minutes before the thumping ceased. All was quiet until I saw a shape move past my backyard window. I gasped and stood up as fast as I could. I almost lost my balance in doing so. I rushed over to my window and tried to see outside, but it was futile. I then saw from the corner of my eye another shape pass by my window. I turned to see it, but it was too late. I then got an idea. I could go upstairs to my bedroom and get a clear view of the front yard of my house. If my guess was correct, the shape seemed to be moving towards my front yard. I rushed upstairs and into my room and swiftly opened the curtains. I did my best to survey the entire yard, but I couldn't see anything that seemed out of place. All there was the snowman that had been built by some neighborhood children days before. You see, I came home one day from work with a snowman built in my yard. I could have knocked it down, but I decided to keep it. It seemed festive. I continued looking around the yard and was confused when I noticed that there was another thing sitting in the other corner of my yard. I couldn't make it out at first, so I pressed my face closer to the glass, and I realized that it was the snowman that had been built in my yard. I quickly looked back to where I thought I'd seen the snowman, and realized that what I was looking at wasn't a snowman. It was some sort of giant frozen figure that resembled a cartoon bear. I realized it resembled the Freddy Fazbear mascot from Fazbear Entertainment. I could see now its pearl blue eyes staring up at my window. I couldn't tell if it was looking at me, but I instinctively ducked down out of view from the window. I waited for a few minutes before peeking through the window and looking out again into the yard, but the ice bear was gone. I then hurried downstairs. Once I made it back down my living room, I noticed my fire was beginning to douse. I then heard thumping from above me, once again, and then the sound of something scuttling down my chimney. I panicked and rushed over to the fireplace and frantically threw more dried wood into the fire. Luckily, it ignited fast. The fire was once again burning. The scuttling from my chimney ceased, and I understood now. That thing had been trying to get in through my chimney, but the fire had prevented it from entering my house. I then decided at that moment that I should better check the rest of my house to make sure that there was no way that thing could get in. So I did. I checked every room and made sure every window was locked up tight. However, all my windows were now covered in ice and frost. I decided to make my way back into the living room, and as it seemed to be the safest place, I sat by the fire for what seemed like hours, keeping the fire hot. Through this period of time, I could see on rare occasions the ice bear pass my windows and even knock on them, very obviously trying to find a way in. After a long while or so, my fire was slowly beginning to die out, and I had no more wood left. I was on edge so much that I was glued to that spot, staring at the dying flames, praying they wouldn't go out. All my windows were now fully covered in frosty ice, and I could no longer see outside. I sat there, waiting, as the thumping from outside grew louder and louder, as faint shapes passed each of my windows. and as I looked at my fireplace once again, I saw the flames of my fireplace completely go out. I backed up from the fireplace once again as I heard the thumping from above me and then scuttling from my chimney. I sat there, curled up like a baby, my eyes fixated on the fireplace, quietly praying to myself. The scuttling became more and more louder and clear. I could make out the sound of crackling ice. Then it stopped for a moment, and then the scuttling proceeded to retreat up my chimney. I didn't understand what had happened until I noticed something. The heavy winds and snow from the blizzard had stopped, and through the melting ice of my window, I could see the beautiful sunlight seeping over the horizon. It was Christmas Day. After a few moments of silence, as the sun began to rise more and more, I got up and slowly walked to my front door. Opening it and observing the outside world, the sun was shining now, casting a beautiful light over the snow-covered neighborhood. I then started laughing. I wasn't hysterical, I was just happy. As happy as a 5-year-old could be on Christmas morning when he opens his gifts. I ran outside laughing and yelling Merry Christmas into the morning air. I looked around my snow-covered yard, but my smile faded. As I looked over to see the snowman in my yard had now been replaced by a snowman that was now in the shape of a bear, and the words Merry Christmas written in the snow right beside it.